Last night I watched a Discovery Channel special on the 10 most extreme animals. The male anglerfish was #1, beating out the duck-billed platypus for the weirdest animal on Earth. The male anglerfish is 40 times smaller than the female. For many years, biologists didn't think the fish were the same species. They seemed so dissimilar. The female has an antenna sticking out of the top of her head that glows with organic phosphorescence to attract her prey, and her sharp, jagged teeth jut from a mouth stuck in a permanent scream, the ultimate female shrew. The male is unremarkable in appearance, but not in behavior. When it's time for the male and female to mate, the male dives kamikaze-like into the side of the female, where he stays, slowly being absorbed by the female until he is nothing but a sperm bank lump protruding from her side. Now that's what I call mating for life. The idea of commitment, and he underlined this next paragraph. The idea of commitment in romantic relationships often feels like that to me. I'm afraid that if I ever truly commit myself to a man, I will become buried permanently in his side, slowly being absorbed until there is nothing left of value except my eggs. And even now, those are starting to expire, like the eggs you buy at the corner liquor store. Or conversely, that my mate will be permanently buried in my side, drawing on my life force to exist and depending completely upon me for his identity. In order to avoid either of these scenarios, I often have selected very anti-anglerfish men who, for one reason or another, are unable or unwilling to commit to a long-term, serious, romantic relationship. For a while, I blamed these men for their apparent inability to commit to a future, until it occurred to me that all of my relationships have one thing in common: me. I pair up with these male versions of myself so that I don't have to acknowledge my own fear of making a serious commitment. Clearly, I am not a paragon of emotional health, but it got me thinking, what does it take for Mr. Anglerfish to make that leap? Obviously, he's driven by some biological imperative, some instinct to proliferate the species that overrides his individual survival need. What are the driving forces behind my mating behavior? I've been asking myself for years, why is it that I can't have sex with someone without becoming attached or falling in love? But I can never commit for the long haul. Is my instinct to mate stronger than my desire to remain an individual, or is my desire to remain an individual what eventually overrides my instinct to mate? I seem to have this little problem with commitment. Again, underlined. Yet I've been a serial mater. I was half-assed involved with somebody for a long period of time, or fully involved for a short period of time. Am I afraid of love? Of being rejected? Am I missing some important commitment gene? Why can't I mate in captivity? Recently, I was at a wedding reception on a beautiful beach in Maui. My friend's 6-year-old daughter, Rose, and I collected heart-shaped coral and rocks to place on every table to help celebrate and commemorate love and all that marriage represents. I watched as a little 6-year-old boy picked up one of the heart-shaped rocks that we had lovingly arranged on the buffet table. Turning it upside down, he pointed to the center of the inverted V that to him looked like a crotch and proudly stated, "This is where my pee-pee goes." Are men and women simply biologically at odds with each other as a species when it comes to love and sex? Deciding to examine these issues from a scientific perspective, I did a little research. The trouble seems to start with sex pheromones, chemicals that when emitted trigger a reproductive behavioral response from a member of the same species. Also, many other types of pheromones, including alarm pheromones and food trail pheromones, are emitted in different animal species. I wish my sex pheromones came with built-in sex alarm pheromones to help weed out the bullshit early on. But pheromonal attraction isn't fatal attraction. All of us can have a pheromonal reaction without taking any action. It seems at this point we still have a choice. Hormonal hell begins once a woman has sex and we produce something called oxytocin. Not to be confused with Oxycontin or oxymoron. Sometimes referred to as the bonding or love hormone, which prompts deep and caring feelings for our partner. Apparently, the more sex a woman has, the deeper the bond. Oxytocin is released during orgasm, which is why it's known as the other big O. It's also released during childbirth, and although I've never had children, I can only imagine that having an orgasm and giving birth are two very different experiences. Oxytocin explains a lot. Like when you meet a man and he seems okay, you're attracted to each other and you start to date and you enjoy each other's company, but life goes on. You have sex with him and suddenly, bam, you can't live without him. Is it love or oxytocin? Studies have compared the falling in love feeling to mental illness, including obsessive-compulsive disorder and the manic phase of manic depression. And researchers attribute hormones to being contributing factors. Does crazy in love really mean that we are addicted chemically to the sensations created in the pleasure centers of our brain? And the emotion is caused more by hormones than the person with whom we are supposedly in love. Are my various hormone levels what is really driving my dating and mating behavior? And let's not forget about dopamine. Last night I met a filmmaker, Mark DeSena, who wrote and directed Dopamine, whose concept is love, real or just a chemical reaction? Dopamine, a hormone involved in the creation of adrenaline in our bodies, is released in spades when we exercise vigorously and or when we make out with someone. This frisky neurotransmitter defines the pleasure pathways in the brain and is the hormonal equivalent of a DJ that gets the whole party started. Maybe I'm just addicted to dopamine and or adrenaline, and my problem is that I don't have a chemical exit strategy other than to find something else that produces more adrenaline. Why can't I just be one of those people who enjoy skydiving or helicopter skiing or some other emotionally safe sport to get their hormonal fix? Why do I have to continue to get and stay high on extreme love, the most dangerous sport of all? I used to think that I had an attachment problem because I'm good at getting into relationships and not so good at getting out when I know that the relationship isn't working. My friend Paul pointed out that I don't have an attachment problem, I have a detachment problem, as most of the men with whom I become involved with are so inappropriate or unavailable. Also underlined, footnote. I made myself available. Unavailable, that I eventually must leave or be left. I hate that part. Once I have sex with a man, I'm in trouble. And if the sex is really good, I'm a goner. Maybe this is where the parallel between orgasms and childbirth comes in. Both involve pain, sooner or later. I suppose what I should have been asking myself is, where did I get the idea that I should ever become sexually involved with anyone whom I don't consider to have who I wouldn't consider having a serious relationship with? Is it because I'm horny or just haven't found the right one? Perhaps, as my friend Diane suggests, my prince picker is broken, and I just keep falling in love with the wrong kind of man. I'll stop there.